Of course, we all know that infidelity isn't the only reason for divorce. In fact, according to most studies, financial problems are the leading cause of divorce in this country. Sometimes marital problems are related to work, and sometimes people just grow apart. Selfish bitch, Brett muttered. More? Asked the pretty waitress, emphasizing her question by raising the coffee pot in her hand. Brett glanced at his watch. No, I have to go. He finished his coffee, left $2 on the table, paid, and left. He had a meeting with Terry, his soon-to-be ex-wife, the selfish bitch. He couldn't believe she thought she had a right to the Continental. It had taken him over 2 years to restore it. Sure, she helped a little, but that car had been his since the moment he saw it. It was his baby, his pride and joy. And now she wanted to take it away from him. Selfish bitch. When he pulled up to his former home, he was a little surprised to see that she hadn't put the house up for sale yet. They hadn't lived there long enough to accumulate any serious money, maybe 10 or 15,000, but neither of them wanted to live there anymore, so they decided to sell the house and split the proceeds. Everything was very civilized. In fact, as far as divorces go, Brett and Terry's divorce was as civilized as it could be, except for the car. It was a 1960 Continental Mark V. Brett had seen it in the yard of an old farmhouse once while driving through Indiana. It was exactly like his father's had been when he was a kid. He wasn't usually a fan of classic cars, but there was something special about this one. Brett stopped to talk to the farmer. He told the gray-haired man in overalls and a bib that he'd be happy to take the old car for free, but the farmer wasn't stupid. He knew very well that even in its condition, the car was worth several $1,000s. They haggled and finally came to an agreement, but before Brett could spend that kind of money, he needed to talk to his wife. "What do you know about restoring old cars?" she asked. "Nothing, but I can learn," he replied. They discussed it for several days, but Terry wasn't convinced. It was a lot of money, and what if he lost interest in the old car? Would they be able to sell it and get their money back, or would it just rust away in their yard instead of sitting at the farmer's place? Brett had already done some research and assured her that they wouldn't lose a penny. Even if he didn't do anything with it, he could sell the car in its current condition for more than they had paid for it. In the end, it was her husband's enthusiasm that decided everything. With his wife's blessing, Brett arranged for the car to be delivered. A week later, when Terry saw it being unloaded from the truck, she changed her mind. But it was too late. They were now the proud owners of an old, rusty piece of junk. "I know it doesn't look very good right now, honey, but I'll bring it back to life. I'll make it young again," he said with a broad smile. Terry always believed in her husband. In her opinion, he couldn't do anything significant if he didn't want to, so she immediately decided that she would support and help him in any way she could. Of course, that was many years ago. Now the Continental was a line drawn in the sand by a failed marriage. "Selfish bitch," he muttered under his breath as he got out of the car and headed for the house. He felt a little strange. It was his first visit to this place in almost 5 months. He couldn't help feeling a little uneasy as he climbed the flat stone steps leading to the porch. They had worked so hard with Terry to make everything perfect. Oh, he knew the divorce was the best thing for both of them, and Terry felt the same way. Hell, it was the only thing they'd agreed on in forever. Still, they'd had many wonderful years together. Brett had just raised his hand to knock when the front door opened. He'd almost forgotten how beautiful she was. "Hi, Brett. Come in," she said, smiling and stepping aside. For a moment he forgot why he had come. A smile began to spread across his face, but then he suddenly remembered the car. He immediately went on the offensive. "Terry, I can't believe you think you have a right to the Continental. What would you do with it if it were yours? "Wait, Brett," she interrupted him. "Let's talk about this over a cup of tea. I just made some." Her pleasant smile and calm demeanor were disarming. Damn, he thought. She always made the best coffee in town? Why not? He began to relax a little as Terry poured him a glass of beer. It was nice to be back in his kitchen. He couldn't help himself. He watched her from behind as she walked over to the counter and put the kettle back in its place. A slight smile appeared on his face as he took his first sip of the hot black nectar. She turned to the table and sat down with her cup of coffee. "So," she said, looking him in the eye, "why do you think I'm not allowed to have a continental breakfast?" The conversation wasn't going the way he had imagined. He was all wound up. He had come ready for a fight, but there was no aggression in her voice. He thought they would be yelling at each other, but they never did. Even when they decided to part ways, the conversation was polite and attentive, but she had never mentioned taking his car before. Brett studied her expression. It was always difficult to read, but she seemed open to negotiation. Maybe she had listened to reason. Maybe there wouldn't be a fight. He would simply explain his position to her logically. When he was done, she would come to the only reasonable conclusion. The car belonged to him. "Terry, if you remember, I bought this car. I repaired it myself. Wait a minute," she interrupted him again. "The money for this car came from our savings. I put as much into that account as you did. I'd say we split the cost of the car 50-50, wouldn't you?" She was right. They both contributed the same amount of money to the savings account every month. And yet, he did all the work. "What do you mean you did all the work?" she continued. "Yes, you did most of the physical work, but who sat at the computer for hours figuring out all the details? That has to mean something." Damn, he thought. Another point for her. Things weren't going the way he expected, and she wasn't finished yet. "Sometimes I even helped you with the car." "Not very often," he interrupted, deciding he had earned a point. Maybe not. We both know I'm not a mechanic, and a lot of it was too complicated for me. I just didn't have the energy to help. But even then, I was there for you, supporting you emotionally." He had to admit that she really did do that. "How many times did I massage your neck and shoulders when you were upset, or kiss your boo-boo when you slipped and fell on the stairs?" Brett took another sip of coffee. He couldn't help but smile as his thoughts returned to the past. God, they were so happy back then. It seemed like all they did was laugh and have a good time together. He missed those days. Who would have thought back then that they would end up in divorce court? Brett sighed, lost in his memories, then returned to the matter at hand. "Terry, come on. You've never driven this car. The few times I tried to get you behind the wheel, you said it was like driving a tank, and you didn't want to risk scratching it. There's a first time for everything, Brett. Maybe you could come with me the first time, just to make sure I'm okay." God, he thought. What's wrong with her? Not only does she want to take my car, she wants me to teach her how to drive. "Here's what I'll do," he replied. "I'll come over on the weekends and drive you around." "And you?" she asked with a smile. "Sure." "How many times?" "I don't know. As many times as you want. Well, if I don't have other plans." Said Terry, indicating that she was thinking about it. "Does that mean I'm getting a car?" asked Brett with some impatience. "No, I was just asking," she teased. "Okay, Terry, if I had known we were going to argue about this, I would have put it in the ownership agreement and let a judge decide. I just thought it would be a mistake and that I would keep the car. I never thought you would want it. Wouldn't it bring back bad memories?" "Bad memories?" she asked, looking a little puzzled. "Like what?" "Well, we spent a lot of time in that car. Remember how we decorated the back seat?" "You mean the one I spent 3 months looking for until I found one that wasn't all torn and worn out?" Damn, he thought. She's scoring points left and right. "Yes, that's the one," he admitted. "Of course I remember. He was already driving it then." We pulled up to the lake. "You said you wanted to show me how much room there was in the back." "And there was a lot of room," she said with a smile. "Damn, we tried almost every position possible. But those aren't bad memories. Why do you think that?" Well, I mean, because of how you treat me now, I just think you probably wish it had never happened. You think so? You wish it had never happened? Brett was surprised. He thought he heard sadness in her voice. A few months ago, when they were discussing divorce, there had been no sadness in her voice. She had sounded as if she couldn't wait to be rid of him. Number. To be honest, those were some of the happiest days of my life, but then I don't understand, Brett, why those should be happy memories for you and not for me, she asked. Well, I don't know, probably. Probably because I know you feel differently about me, differently than I feel about you, I mean. I understand. Maybe we should talk about this before the divorce is final. How do you feel about me? Brett really didn't want to get into details. He felt awkward. He didn't want to admit that he still loved her, especially since he knew she no longer felt the same way about him. Come on, Terry. I came to talk about the car. Let's not go there. Damn it, sometimes he could be so destructive, she cursed herself. Okay, Terry said, getting up to pour herself another cup of coffee. It's in my garage. You know, possession is 9/10 of the law, she said with a smile. Damn it, Terry. You agreed to let me leave it here until I find a place to store it. You know very well I can't just leave it in the driveway. He was starting to get angry. She didn't want that. I know, she conceded. That's not what I meant. It's just... What? Brett interrupted sharply, now angry. Just what, Terry? I want to know what you meant when you said I had bad memories. Do you think I hate you? Brett sighed quietly. He didn't seem willing to avoid the conversation. I don't know. Maybe you don't hate me, but you made it clear that you don't love me anymore. So it stands to reason that you might regret those memories, that's all. No, I don't regret them. I don't regret any of the time we spent together. Should she say it? She had been trying to get him to admit it. She must have known how he really felt. But it seemed like she would have to make the first move. She decided to take a chance and say it. I don't hate you either, actually. The only thing I regret is that we broke up. Brett couldn't believe his ears. Did she just say she regretted that they broke up? What the hell? She was the one who said they had grown apart, that they had nothing in common anymore. Terry, you said yourself that it would be better if we got divorced and went our separate ways, remember? Yes, I remember, although I don't remember you disagreeing with that. Well, I don't know. We just stopped seeming like a loving couple. I know. We're both to blame for doing what so many people do and taking each other for granted over time. Yes, that's probably true, but that's not the only reason, Terry. We hardly ever made love. Remember how it was in the beginning? God, we couldn't keep our hands off each other, especially when we were working on the Continental. Damn, we had so much fun working on that together. He smiled again, and this time he had to fight back tears as memories came flooding back. I agree, Terry replied. We were a real team. Remember the first time we washed the car? Brett smiled. Yeah, but as I recall, we didn't actually wash the car. We were too busy hosing each other down. Yeah, she confirmed with a laugh. I don't think I ever laughed as hard as I did when I was a little girl. Yeah, we had a great time, that's for sure. But as soon as we were done with the car, we started drifting apart. It wasn't right after we finished. We still had a good time after that. I remember when we pulled up to your mom's house and saw her face when she saw it. Yeah, she recognized it right away. It was just like with my dad's car when he died. She even had tears in her eyes when we took her out for a walk, Terry recalled. You're right, Brett admitted. We had a lot of fun in that car even after it was finished. For a moment, he remembered that time with tenderness. So, where did it all go wrong? Terry interrupted his thoughts. You said you had all the answers when you brought up divorce, he replied sharply. Brett, I just said what we were both thinking at the time. Come on, neither of us worked on this marriage. It seemed like the reality of life always got in the way. You became more interested in your friends than in me. Terry, I only spent so much time with them because you checked on Audrey every chance you got. I was tired of being home alone, so I started seeing other men. What did you expect? I don't know, she replied. I knew we had problems, but I didn't know what to do. I started going to Audrey's all the time, so I wouldn't have to think about our marriage falling apart. It was my escape. Well, it seemed to me that you were losing interest in me and in our marriage. I always thought it was because you didn't love me anymore. We started making love less and less. And when we did, it seemed like the passion wasn't there anymore. Terry thought about his words. Yes, I remember that I wasn't as excited about love as I was in the beginning. I don't really understand why, but I know it's not because I don't love you anymore. It just seemed old and routine, like we were doing it because that's what married people are supposed to do. But neither of us had the same strong feelings for each other as we did in the beginning. We needed to find a way to spice things up a little, to keep things fresh. So why didn't we do that? Brett asked. Good question. If we had, we probably wouldn't be here, a month after our marriage broke up. They both sipped their coffee, and there was a pause. Brett thought deeply. He wondered what it all meant. At first, she said she wanted to talk to him about saving the Continental, but they ended up talking mostly about their marriage. He began to think that she didn't need the car at all, that it was just an excuse to get him out of there. Terry thought so too, but not about the car. She needed to know if they were doing the right thing by getting divorced. She knew how she felt, but how did her husband feel? Did he want to go through with the divorce? Did he still love her? She decided the only way to find out was to ask him. Brett, do you still love me? Come on, Terry, we've already discussed this. No, we haven't. We talked about how our lives had grown apart. We talked about our different interests. We talked about how to live without each other. Hell, we talked about everything except how we still felt about each other. Before the divorce is final, I need to know if you still love me. Since Brett decided to get a divorce, he has spent many nights in his apartment mourning the love he lost. Over the course of several years, Terry and Brett had gone from being a loving married couple to two people living separately in the same house. They rarely argued, but the spark between them had died. One evening, Terry brought up divorce. She said she thought they should both live their own lives. He agreed, but then realized he had made a terrible mistake. He missed her terribly and still loved her. But it was too late. The divorce would soon be final. She had already been on several dates that he knew about, and possibly more. She was already moving on. What should he do? Reveal himself and admit that he still loved her? Was he really going to humiliate himself to give her that satisfaction? Was that the price he had to pay to get his car back? Damn it. He had always been honest with her before the divorce. Should he be any less honest with her now? Terry, I sometimes think that, well, maybe we're making a mistake, but I know how you feel. Damn it, Brett, stop telling me how I feel. It's clear from our conversation that you have no idea how I feel, she said firmly. Oh, really? Okay, then what do you feel? I love you. At those words, his breath caught in his throat. For the first time in a long time, his heart seemed to stop. You love me? He repeated with a smile. Yes, Brett, I still love you. But you're seeing other people. People say you're moving on. That's how it is. Who? What people? Have you been spying on me? No, of course not, but, well, people. People we both know, friends, you know. I was told that you were seeing someone, that you were already looking for someone new, and they advised me to do the same. Terry sighed, disappointed by their advice. Why did people always meddle in other people's business? Why had she gone to them with everything she had? Yes, I dated him a little, just a little. I went on 3 dates with 3 different guys. She saw the question in his eyes that she knew he wouldn't ask, but that needed to be answered. No, Brett, I didn't sleep with any of them. I won't say I wasn't tempted, because I was. I'm sure you don't need to tell me that 5 months is a long time, and to be honest, before every date, I thought there was a good chance I'd bring him home, but... She took another sip of coffee and bowed her head thoughtfully. She wanted to say what she was going to say in a way that would matter, so that he would understand that she was sincere. By the end of each date, I didn't want to sleep with any of them anymore. In fact, after the third date, I realized there was only one man I wanted in my bed. She looked him in the eyes. It's you, Brett. You're the only man I want in my bed. Brett couldn't believe his ears. He had dreamed of them being together again, but he never thought it would actually happen. He was sure he had lost her forever. And then it dawned on him. Did she really want to stay married, or was she offering him friends with benefits? He had to find out. Are you saying you don't want a divorce? A broad smile spread across her face. I think we should sleep together and talk tomorrow. What do you think? She was right about one thing. 5 months was a long time. He still wasn't sure what she was offering him. All he knew for sure was that she was offering him sex, a chance to make love to her again, and he wasn't going to turn that down. Brett followed his wife into the bedroom. Yes, she was still his wife, at least for now. He was going to make love to her like a wife. When they reached the bed, he turned and looked into her eyes. There was a desire in them that he hadn't seen in a long time. The foreplay was short. That night, they both slept more soundly than ever, as if the word divorce had never been uttered. Brett heard the joyful singing of birds outside his bedroom window. He opened his eyes and saw the morning sun. For a moment, he looked at the white ceiling and realized he was in his home. This wasn't a dream, he thought. This really happened. He looked around and saw his wife staring at him intently. A broad smile lit up her beautiful face. "Good morning, handsome," she whispered. "Good morning, beautiful," he replied with an equally broad smile. She snuggled up to him, and he held her tightly. "We'll split the continent," he said. "What?" Her heart suddenly stopped. Was he still thinking about divorce? "Yes. I'll teach you how to drive, and you'll drive sometimes, and I'll drive sometimes." He looked back and saw the frightened expression on her face. He kissed her to calm her down. "I'll teach you to drive on one condition. Never, ever say the word divorce again. Not now, not ever." He felt the tension in her body melt away. "Everything will be fine, big boy," she promised. "Okay, first thing tomorrow morning, I'll call the lawyer and tell him everything is off." Terry decided that a simple thank you wasn't enough to express her gratitude. That morning, they had enough time to not make love, as they needed to pick up some of his things. That evening, they both renewed their vows. They held hands, looked into each other's eyes, and pledged their devotion, love, honor, and respect. They promised never to take each other for granted and to work on their marriage every day. They both knew how close they had come to losing what was most precious to them, and they were determined never to let that happen again. On Monday, Terry was getting ready for dinner with her best friend, Audrey. Audrey was happy to see a smile on her friend's face for the first time in months. "Judging by that smile, your little trick with the car worked?" she asked cheerfully. "Like magic," Terry replied, beaming as she sat down. "What did he say?" "That he loves me," she replied. "He's calling his lawyer today to stop the divorce." "Oh, Terry, that's wonderful." "Audrey, I've been trying to figure out how we got to the point of divorce, but I just can't. I think we just grew tired of each other. Maybe we needed this to wake us up. You know what they say, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. Well, I'm glad you both realized that before you lost it." "Yeah, me too," Terry replied with relief. "Although I don't understand why you took the car." Why didn't you just call him and say you wanted to talk about the divorce? Because I wasn't sure how he felt. I didn't know if he still loved me. If I had called him and said I wanted to talk about divorce, he might have just rejected me, and I wanted to talk to him in person. I knew the best way to make sure he wouldn't come was to threaten to leave him the car. Well, I'm very happy for you, Terry. Thanks, Audrey. But tell me, if it hadn't worked out, if Brett had said he wanted a divorce, would you have let him keep the car? Are you kidding? I would never take that car away from him. It's like a child to him. I couldn't hurt someone I loved like that, even if he didn't love me. Brett and Terry kept their promises. They worked on their marriage every day. They went on dates not once a month, but whenever they felt like it. Sometimes it was dinner and dancing or a show, sometimes the theater, and sometimes they just parked by the lake and kissed in the back seat of the Continental. 3 years after they started dating, Brett's mother died. He and Terry handled all the funeral arrangements together, and she never left his side during that difficult time. A couple of weeks after the funeral, they cleaned out his house to sell it. Terry looked through papers, receipts, and old documents that his mother had kept for years, while Brett packed up family heirlooms. "Brett," she called from the bedroom, "could you bring me the registration card for the Continental?" "Registration card? What for?" "I just want to check something," she replied. A few minutes later, Brett handed his wife the Continental's registration number. "Honey, you always say that this car is like your father's car, right?" "Yes," he replied, still a little embarrassed. "No, you're wrong. It's not just that," she said, picking up the registration card and holding it up to another piece of paper. "It's the same car." He doubted his wife's words. "Listen, honey, your mom has kept your dad's license plate number all these years. They're the same." Brett took both pieces of paper from her and compared them. She was right. The numbers were the same. His legs buckled, and he sat down on the bed next to his wife. "You once told me that there was something about the Continental that made you want that car. I always thought it was just because it reminded you of your father, but it was more than that, my dear. I truly believe that your father led you to that car. It was his way of reaching out to you." On the way back to Illinois, they stopped at the cemetery. The remains of flowers were still scattered across his mother's freshly dug grave. Nearby was his father's old but well-kept grave. Brett hugged his loving wife and said gratefully, "Look, Dad," nodding toward the Continental Park just a few feet away. "I remember how much you loved that car, and I promise I'll take good care of it. I hope you know how much happiness and joy it brought Terry and me." He paused to wipe a tear from his eye. "Take care of Mom. She loved you and honored your memory until the day you were reunited." They looked at each other. She hugged him, rested her head on his chest, and held him tightly. "I love you so much, Brett." "I love you too, my darling," he said, gently pressing his cheek against her forehead.